You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Here we go. Welcome once again to the GrantCast. My name is Baciocco. It is a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for checking this episode of the GrantCast out. And a big thank you to all our Patreon patrons who help make this show possible. The other night, I was sleeping. I was in the throes of sleep, and I rolled over and I kind of adjusted the pillow. I thought my head had slipped off the pillow, and so I adjusted the pillow and laid my head down on it. Turns out it was Harvey. Harvey, and he was not happy that I suddenly just plunked my head down on him. I don't know. He's funny because obviously he sleeps on the bed, and he's not supposed to be that high up on the bed, but for some reason he had snuck that high up on the bed. And he paid the price for it. I used him as a pillow. So, sorry, buddy. That's what happens. I wanted to tell a story today because I recently drove to Northern California for the Northern California Puppet Festival with my friend Russ Walco. And it was fun because my parents have moved out of the Bay Area. They live up in Oregon now. My brother is still in the Bay Area. But for things like Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that, most of my family has moved out of the Bay Area. As I said, my brother is there. But if there is a Christmas or a Thanksgiving, my brother will usually go to my parents and we'll go to the parents. And anyway, so I just don't go to the Bay Area a lot. So it was fun to go to the San Francisco Bay Area. And it got me sort of reminiscing about growing up, as it always seems to do. And I remembered this story. And I'm going to very hard try not to mention names in the story, and I'll tell you why at the end. When I was in elementary school, and we're talking about, let's say, third grade, my parents sort of worked out a deal. I'm sure this is very common with people who have kids that go to schools. My parents worked out a little thing where, sort of a rotational carpool thing. So every once in a while, they would drive me and some of the other students from my class to school. And then one of the other students from the class, their mom would pick us up after school and then drive us home. And so it was basically this one family. But the mom of this family would drive myself, her daughter, and another student home. So that's just the way it was. I don't know how long we did that, but we did that for a while. Or it was just like, if you drive them to school, we'll pick them up or whatever. So it was very, very nice. And I don't know what else to say about that. That was just the arrangement. So one day we got picked up from school. This other student's mom picked us up, and we went to drop off the other student. So not the daughter, the other student that was in the car at their place. And when this mom pulled up in front of the house, she pulled up across the street from the house, and because that's the way the traffic was flowing, and then walked this other student across the street to the front door and knocked on the door and was talking to the parents. Well, I was sitting in the front seat of the car, and the driver's daughter was sitting in the back seat. And I don't know what possessed me to do this. I don't know why I did this. I don't know what I thought was going to happen when I did this. But the driver left the car running, and I just pulled back on the transmission, the shift knob, because it was in the center. In my non-driving elementary school head, if you put it into gear, you would need to step on the gas in order for it to go anywhere. And as we all know, as adults, that's not the case. You put it into gear and it'll start going. Well, I slipped the car into reverse, and the car immediately started going backwards. And the way the wheels had turned, the front wheels were turned, it immediately started going across the street. because just the angle of because she had pulled in on that side of the street, and I guess the tires were still sort of turned, so it was backing up and we were going across the street. Well, the daughter in the back seat starts screaming. I immediately start trying to push the gear shift back up into place, not knowing that you had to squeeze the button in order to do that. To me is really weird. Like, why would it go backwards into reverse without pushing the button? Because I know I didn't know about pushing the button. Anyway, the car is rolling. The driver's side door is open, and the driver sees what is happening and comes running across, the front yard of this house. And the car was not going very fast, but it was going. And she tried to hop into the front seat, tripped and fell underneath the open driver's side door. Now, it could have been incredibly horrible. Body parts crushed under the front tire, all that kind of good stuff. I was finally able to, I realized if I push the button and push the gear shift forward, that would put it back into park. But I don't think I grasped that. I think I just knew, like, I pulled it this way. If I push it back up the other way, the car will stop. We stopped. I was able to do that right before the car would have hit a fence. It did not hit the fence. It had driven up on the opposite sidewalk. There were curbs, but the curbs were sloped curbs, if that makes sense. It's like this part of town where there are curbs, there's sidewalks and there are curbs, but the curbs aren't hard angles. Like, they're not blocky. They're like kind of slopey and curvy. So the car just went right up onto the sidewalk and then almost through a fence before it was stopped. The driver miraculously was unharmed, except I remember vividly, she was a nurse and she was in her nurse's uniform and she had scraped up her knee. And I just remember it was bloody on her knee. It was like a pretty bad scrape on her knee. And she was wearing like white, I guess, pantyhose. And there was a big tear where her knee was, and then there was a lot of blood. So that is a very vivid memory of mine, was seeing blood running down her leg on her white stockings or pantyhose or whatever it is. And anyway, this was a pretty significant thing. I remember that she took me to my place. She explained to my mom what happened. My mom was very upset with me for doing this, but kind of looking back and thinking about it, yes, I was the one that put the car in reverse. But why was the car left running with two kids in the car? That's my new realization on this thing, this seminal moment in my life that I have remembered ever since the day it happened. And it's one of those vivid memories I have as a kid. And I always have just thought, like, man, it's my fault because I put it in there and I almost hurt her and it could have been really bad. But then realizing it now as a 50-year-old, looking back going, why? It was just one of those things where she's like, oh, I'm just going to run this other student across the street. I'm going to leave the car running. I'll leave the door open. But it's like, you don't do that. Forget the whole thing. Now, this was the 70s, so forget the whole thing of like, if we were supposed to be in car seats. I think we were, I don't know. Well, I don't know, what the laws now are of car seats. There was certainly no laws then. I was sitting in the front seat, which you're, probably not supposed to be in the front seat. The car was left running. So while, yes, I did put the car into reverse, at the end of the day, should two kids have been left alone in a running car? That was my realization. That was my thought. So I'm not saying it's this woman's fault. This is part of the reason why I'm not using real names here in this story. I'm not saying it's her fault because I was the one who did that. But maybe it was not all my fault. Does that make sense? Maybe it is not all my fault. Maybe the blame could be spread around a little bit because I'm pretty sure I don't think I would necessarily leave kids in the car. I don't have any kids, but I barely leave Harvey in the car if I have to go run and do something. But I certainly do not leave the car running and the door open. Anyway, this was just a story I thought of, and looking at it from this perspective, I have kind of a new outlook on it that maybe it wasn't all completely my fault. And that's the story I wanted to tell you today, ladies and gentlemen, on the GrantCast. I want to thank you so much for listening. Again, a big shout out to all the Patreon patrons. We'll be back soon with another episode of the GrantCast. Thank you so much. Talk to you later. Goodbye, everybody. This episode of the GrantCast was edited by Stephen Staver and was made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a pledge for as little as $1 a month. Patrons at the behind-the-scenes level and above get access to a video of the recording of this episode. I want to send a big shout-out to all of our patrons and a special shout-out to our patron producers, Eve Cunning, Kathy Crawford, Tony Urbano, Brandy, David Akers, Paul, Scott Armstrong, Vicky Sebring, Ricky Chavez, Karina, and Jeff Toro. If you'd like to become a patron and receive episodes of the GrantCast before they are released, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly pledge today. And thank you for your support. This episode of the GrantCast is copyright 2024 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Baciocco, executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Here we go.
You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.